Okay, now that we've set up our .NET application, it's now Angular's turn, and we're going to install and configure an Angular application that's going to consume our .NET API backend. So I've come to the Angular docs before we get started on this because there are a few important concepts I want to mention before we just go ahead and install this. So I'm on angular.io, and if I go to the documentation here and take a look at getting started and setup, then we've got our prerequisites for Angular. And to use the Angular framework, you should be familiar with the following: JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and knowledge of TypeScript is helpful but not required. We're going to be using TypeScript throughout this course, and if you've got some basic understanding of JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, then that should be good enough for this particular training course. If you've never used any of these before, then this could be quite challenging, as I'm already expecting you to have some basic understanding of these different concepts. And we also need an active or maintenance long-term support version of Node.js. Now, we should have installed this earlier on, but just to take a look at the version compatibility guide, then inside here it tells us what version of Node we need to use with what version of Angular. Now, at the time of recording, Angular is on 17.1. And that means we need a version of Node that is greater than 18.13 or greater than 20.9. So we can have 20.10, 20.11, 20.12, but we cannot use 21 point whatever or 22 point whatever with this version of Angular. So if we just double check that, I'm just going to go to my terminal and say node -- version. And this will tell me which version of Node I'm using. So I'm on 20.11.1. And does that mean that I've got the compatible, correct version of Node to use? Well, let's go and take a look. And as long as it's greater than 20.9, then I'm okay to use this. But this caret here refers to the minor version. The one on the left is major version. The one in the middle is referred to as the minor version. And the one on the right here refers to the patch version. So Node's 20.11, that's fine because that's greater than 20.9. But what would not be fine is 21 point something for using this specific version of Angular. So do be careful with Angular because they do update Angular frequently. And when I say frequently, let's take a look. Because if we take a look at their release practices, then this tells us what Angular plan to do in terms of their release schedule. And let's scroll down here, the release frequency. In general, expect the following release cycle: a major release every 6 months. Currently, at the time of recording in May 2024, version 17 is the current major version. Now, just around the corner, there will be Angular 18 because it's every 6 months. And if I take a look at the schedule, then 17.1 was the week of January 15th, 2024. That means that version 18 is coming pretty much as I'm recording this course, actually. And you may be tempted to think, well, version 18 is out and it's stable now. I can just go ahead and use that. And for the most part, sure, you can, because I'm going to be using the latest and greatest ways of doing things that are compatible with version 17 of Angular. And I can guarantee you that I haven't used any deprecated code. So I can guarantee you most of the code we write is going to be compatible with version 18. But do be careful with this because we do use some third-party packages. And I'll just give you a quick example of one that we're going to be using. So we're going to be using ngGallery at some point in this course so that we can display a gallery of images for a particular user. Is this going to be compatible with Angular 18? Well, how do we find out? Well, first of all, let's go and take a look at where we can get the package from. So we get the package from NPM. When we're working with JavaScript-based applications, then Node Package Manager is one way that we can download and use a package that's available that we can use in our project. And we'll be using NPM for that. So if I just go and open this link in a new tab and take a look at ngGallery, then possibly the documentation in here will tell us whether or not this version, version 11, that was published 10 months ago is compatible with which versions of Angular. And then if I take a look at the documentation here, well, it's a bit limited. It doesn't actually tell us. But then this one tells us it was published 5 months ago. Okay. But then if we go a step further and we take a look at the repository, the GitHub repository that contains all the code for this package, it's open source like all the packages we're going to be used. So we've got access to the code that's used in this particular package. And I go and take a look inside this project and specifically look at what this project is depending on. And we can find out from the package.json file. So I'm going to go and take a look inside here and see what this project's dependencies are. And we can see that this is dependent on several Angular packages, 17.1, 17.1, but the caret again is quite important here, so it's at least 17 point something. So that means if I'm using version of Angular 17.1, 17.2, 17.3, I'm going to be able to use this ng-gallery package without incident. However, in a week or two from the time of recording that I'm on now, Angular 18 is going to be released. But does that mean that this third-party package is going to be updated at the same time? Well, we don't know. And that's the problem. Sometimes it can be the same week, sometimes it can be the same month, sometimes it's not. And there's 3 or 4 different packages that we rely on to create our application that I know are going to be working for Angular 17. But I do not know, nor do I know when they might be working for Angular 18. So my hard recommendation here is really to stick with the same version of Angular that I'm using. I'll show you how to achieve that and take that approach. It can be tricky to resolve versioning issues when you're fairly new or learning something new. So I'd suggest stick with known working versions that I'm going to demonstrate, then you won't run into any versioning issues. So back to the Angular documentation and what we need to do to set it up. If we go back to the setup documentation, then we need to first of all install the Angular CLI. So I'm going to copy this command into my clipboard. This is something that we install globally, and then once we have it, we can use it to create our project. For those of you on Windows computers, if you are using PowerShell, you do need to manage the settings in PowerShell to allow certain commands or certain scripts to execute. So if you do use PowerShell, please note this. If you use command prompt, then you don't need to do anything inside here related to setting of an execution policy. So I'm just going to take this command and we'll go back to the terminal and I'm going to paste in this command, but before I execute it, I'm going to say at 17. This is going to give me the latest version available of Angular 17, and when I create my project, it's going to use Angular 17 to create this. So I'll press return and let this go ahead and do its thing. And by the way, we get npm when we installed Node. So we didn't need to install anything additional to get hold of the Node package manager. But this might take a moment or two to install. And in fact, it's finished already. I was going to say I was going to pause the video and come back when it's done, but it is done already. So if I clear this screen and type in ng version, ng is the command that we get with the Angular command line interface. And when we install Angular globally, we should now have access to ng, which gives us access to all of the Angular commands. And if I type ng version, then this tells us which version of Angular we are using. So in this case, the Angular CLI is 17.3.7. And then we get some details about various Angular packages that are available. Okay, great. What this means is that we can now create our Angular project. And we're going to say ng new. And inside the solution folder this is, please, not the API folder. Please make sure you're at the level of where I am, the dating app, the solution folder. And then I'm going to say ng new client and press return. Now this is going to ask us a couple of questions, and these do change between major versions of Angular. This is for Angular 17 I'm using. So which style sheet format would we like to use? I'm just going to select CSS and accept the default for this. And then we get asked a question, do we want to enable server-side rendering and static site generation? We're going to say no to this. And the one that's capitalized is the default. So if I just press return now, then I'm saying no, I do not want server-side rendering. Please just accept the default or say no to ensure that you do not get server-side rendering enabled. It does change certain aspects of the project, and it is not easy to revert it to a non-server-side rendered application. And if you made a mistake and said yes there, please just go ahead and delete your Angular project and recreate it without server-side rendering, because it's a lot of files to change what that would implement in your project. Now this one will take a moment or two, so once it's underway installing the packages, or whilst it's doing so, I'm just going to pause the video and come back once it has completed. And now that has installed, in the next lesson we'll take a look at what it installed and how we can run our Angular app and see it in action.